to the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is January 17th, 2024 at 9:08 in the morning. So we're beginning our day today with our captive insurance legislative day. So we're happy to have representatives of our captive insurance with us today to chat with us and talk to us more about captives and how important part they play in the state of Vermont. Kevin, did you want to start things off or did you want Gail to start?
Okay,
Gail?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Where would you like me to sit?
Right in the front. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here. All right. So where would you like me to start? Introduction of myself?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gail Newman, and I am the Global Vice President of Risk Management for Bright Horizons Family Solutions. We are a global provider of daycare, aka early childhood education, as we like to call it, backup care services, which I'll dive into in a little bit, and why having a captive domicile here in the state of Vermont is very impactful, but also a host of educational services. And the care spectrum that our business provides really spans the whole life cycle of a human. So we're not only just focused on small early childhood education, but we also expand into elder care services as well. We've had a captive domiciled here in the state of Vermont. We're in our 7th year. I've been with Bright Horizons, coincidentally, just as long as we've had the captive formed for our business. And we primarily started our captive simply because we had no other option. Back in 2017, the types of coverages that we need to not only operate our business, but contractually honor a lot of what's demanded by our clients is a traditional risk model that is just not one feasible at this point or commercially available. So capacity for what we need in terms of not only general liability coverages, but abuse coverages, particularly sexual abuse and molestation. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue easily, but it's a reality of what we need to operate is not feasible. So we have been able to not only procure that through our very successful captive here in the state of Vermont, but we've been able to do it at such a level that is very appeasing to a lot of our clients that we have. When I say client-based business, the write-up I did coming in here today, we are the largest provider of client-based childcare. And what that means is for businesses, when you go and you apply for a job and you start on your first day, you are afforded your traditional healthcare benefits, vision, dental options to opt into a 401k. The thousands of clients that we have worldwide also afford their employees not only as an attraction strategy, but a retention strategy. Is we also have a host of options through Bright Horizons, either a childcare on the campus where it's subsidized by the employer, backup care services, educational types of services, so on and so forth. So I think this is a really pivotal time for me to be presenting in front of you and why this is really important for our business, because we're in the midst, literally as we speak, of changing our business plan for our captive, and we're breaking it out into a variety of cells. So the pandemic, like for everyone, was incredibly impactful in a negative way to our business. First and foremost, it shut our business down. We had to furlough 80% of our operations worldwide. And what that did was really spotlight where we already had cracks in the ever challenged attraction or retention of childcare providers. They're, in my opinion, grossly underpaid, and it's a profession that is very challenging. I know even here talking in the state of Vermont, where ironically our business operates globally, we operate in about 47 states. Vermont is not a state that we operate in. I've actually had some conversations with Joan Goldstein in the last year in terms of there's billing and funding. How do we try to replicate the model here? And it's very challenging because first and foremost, getting talent and paying them is very difficult. When the pandemic happened and we had to furlough 80% of our childcare providers, what they found is they could go work for Whole Foods, they could go work for Starbucks, make a lot more money, arguably get a better benefits package, and not deal with the stress of taking care of children. So when we started to reopen our business and bring folks back, we did it where we increased pay for childcare providers significantly. But what does that mean? That means that we have, and we're still doing it, we're taking a very large look at our overall overhead spending of our business and saying, where do we need to conserve? Where do we need to shift? So what the pandemic did was really, it's a turn for us to say, how can we make our captive even a more effective and efficient use of our funds? What we're also seeing is that with the cyber breaches, with the catastrophic events happening, weather events, we're getting impacted incredibly so in a negative way on our property coverages, our cyber coverages, and we're looking to put those in our captive as well, because a lot of these multi-million-dollar premiums that we're spending, that we would prefer to shift to paying our providers more money to not only attract them, but retain them for a very big need worldwide, is that we're looking at reducing overhead spend. So I think that's an important piece of this as well. The second thing the pandemic did was that it really shifted our business model, and that we're seeing with a lot of businesses and just people in general, they're not going back to their offices full time. They may be in 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And that really has a unique angle at our business model, where we largely depended on 5 days a week. Somebody would bring their child or children into a brick and mortar location, and that's where a large part of our revenue has traditionally come from. We're seeing that shift is, very impactful to the business, that it's not coming back to the way it was, nor will it ever. But where we've seen the impact is what's our backup care side of the business. That has exploded exponentially in the last few years, and we're really investing in that side of the business, because what parents are saying, not only with young children, but also realizing that they've got aging parents who may not be eligible for full-time care, is that they need somebody to go into their home when they're either working remotely, they need to run out and go to a business meeting, they need to come up to Vermont for the day to meet with all of you, and somebody needs to come to their house and take care of their child or their parent. So what they do is they elect to use our backup care benefit. Backup care is something that is not in a traditional city setting where a lot of our brick and mortar locations are. We rely heavily on a footprint of third-party providers in more rural areas where people live. And what's happening now is that those third-party providers, much in the way that we were as a big corporation 7 years ago, can also not get insurance coverage. So they're coming to us as a thought leader, but also a leader in having a successful captive and going, what can you do? They're desperate. Can you help us? So we are in the process right now, very sensitively speaking, of forming a cell, and we're bringing our entire franchise business into the cell captive so we can afford coverages not only to our franchises, which contribute to a large part of that backup footprint, but they're also able to honor their contractual obligations to their clients and the families in their care. So I think there's two, really big success stories. Well, one is a success story, one is charging hard to be a success story, is that we couldn't do this, we couldn't operate without our captive, because there's no other option at this point for the liability coverages that we need, not only for our mainstay business, but also for the third-party footprint that we're expanding on to be able to provide critical care to families that are out there. But I also think that, as we look to continue to invest in educations of our providers, we're offering free education to our child caregivers, but also pay them more to remain competitive, but also be of service to the families, not only in the US, but worldwide. We're looking at leveraging the captive to extend to our UK business, our Netherlands business, our Australian business, because they too are starting to find that they're challenged with childcare insurance coverages, much in the way we are, that they're kind of catching up to where the US is. We're looking to the team of folks here in the state of Vermont, because I'm not finding anywhere else, whether I go through a potential solution in Germany for a captive or wherever that may be, I'm not getting the answers I need from the questions. I'm not getting the introductions to the carriers that confront global paper to support my captive. So what we're finding is that all roads lead back here. And I know it sounds kind of, you know, motherhood and apple pie, but it really is a story that is worth telling for our business, because I do not have a large team. I operate a global department with very limited resources because we've had to make cuts overhead wise to be able to support our child caregivers. So I look to the various teams of people, whether it be Sandy and her department, my captive management team, they're all a phone call away. I spend a lot of time interacting with the folks here saying, here's the interesting, dilemma we have. We have a franchise business that extends into the UK. What do we do? And it's like, we'll figure it out for you. So I think, in a nutshell, that's why we're here today. We're able to operate. We're able to continue to extend more and more opportunities for sound insurance coverage to not only our mainstay business, but to a lot of the third parties that are around us. But we're also looking at using it as a cost saving strategy for our business by bringing other more, what I would say, predictable, typical lines of coverage, property, cyber, management liability coverages, so we can make that money work for us and reinvest it into our business. Any questions?
Questions for Dan?
That was easy.
No, I just want to commend you for being able to change your business practices and forge ahead. And in Vermont, we've really prided ourselves on being able to increase the pay for childcare providers. So I'm glad you're doing that.
Absolutely. It's not easy. It's not easy. People are still having children, so there's that.
Yeah.
Well, there's not enough of them anymore.
Sure. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Kevin Mead from Newport, the president for the moment, changing my title, of the Vermont Captive Insurance Association. Couple of themes to talk with you today about the captive insurance industry in Vermont. The first is, please don't make this a drinking game, but you'll hear from a lot of us today that Vermont is now the #1 domicile for captive insurance in the world. And like I said, please don't make it a drinking game that when you hear that.
It'd be a bad day if we did that.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't be looking too good.
So effectively 40 years of hard work has created an overnight success is what has happened. Because it is now 41 years over since the legislation that gave birth to the captive legislation, the captive insurance industry in Vermont. And through the support of that industry by folks like yourself, we're now at the stage where it is the global #1 industry. And amusingly, literally based on statistics that are coming out just in the last week, since I was with you last week, that gap is opening. More captives being registered in Vermont than are being registered in the number of 2 and 3 domiciles globally. So we are able to build upon that success. There's a global notoriety that comes with that, and truly a global notoriety. For family reasons, I'm having to go to Europe, to Ireland and the UK on a fairly regular basis. And a lot of folks involved in the captive industry are in the UK. And I literally set up meetings with them. And I just call them up and say, hi, and I've never met these guys before. I'm Kevin Mead with the VCIA, can we get together? And they literally just go, yes, love to. Because they want to know what's going on in Vermont. So there's a global notoriety here. And also jobs for Vermonters. There are a number, and you'll hear from Brittany about our economic impact, but these are good, well-paying jobs for Vermonters. And so there's a great deal of impact there. And our reach, our conference in August of last year, we had 1,100 people come to that conference here. Of those, 25%, over 25% were first-time attendees. So we're getting, there's a refresh going on. It's not the same faces every time. We also have our road shows where we literally take a sort of a mini conference on the road. And we'll be doing one of those in March of this year here in Vermont. And again, Brittany's a strong part of that, and you'll hear about her involvement in that later on as well. We also do webinars where we provide some of the education that we're renowned for at our conference in a format that's easily digestible by people wherever they happen to be, so they don't have to travel. And last year, I remember sitting here and you said to me, what's the next captive? And I said, the next captives might be captives, but it might be captives going global. So about a month after, 6 weeks after our testimony here last year, we took our roadshow to Vermont. Representatives of the DFR, Brittany was there, and I was there as part of the VCIA effort, and we went to Mexico City. And we did education and we did meetings in Mexico City. And there is now a knock-on effect from that to the extent that Brittany facilitated a phone call last week with her pretty reasonable Spanish and my dreadful Spanish, and luckily their reasonable English, working on furthering those relationships in Mexico, and from there using that potentially as a springboard to Latin America. And I think that still applies, that the expansion of captives globally could be an area for Vermont to excel in. I also need to talk to you briefly about threats. 41 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and at least one Indian tribal administration are captive domiciles in the US. Just last year, Italy and France established or re-established their status as captive domiciles. And the United Kingdom is looking at using the strength they have in the global insurance market present in London with Lloyd's as to seeing whether or not they could also establish a captive regime for administration in the United Kingdom. So constant competition is out there. At a more local level, where in the world do we put 1,100 people that come to our conference? We have to use 6 hotels in Burlington. We have to bus people around. Next question, how do we get 1,100 people to Burlington in a 2-day stretch? All I can say is if you've got relatives that want to come visit on about August the 8th, don't try and get a flight in because they'll be coming to our show. So we need that expansion of things like conference facilities. We need the expansion of the airport, of air service, because these folks need to come in. Not only for the conference, they need to come in so they can meet with Sandy and her colleagues at the DFR. They need to come in so they can hold their board meetings. We need that infrastructure that supports that captive industry here. We are effectively the de facto world conference. Didn't plan for that, but we're bigger than the next 2 conferences held in the US combined. They don't reach the same numbers as we do. So we get people from all over the world. And this is another story you'll hear from me on a regular basis. At one of the events at our conference, I was sat next to a lady and she said, I'm from Yuma, Arizona. And I said, just how difficult is it to get from Yuma, Arizona to Burlington, Vermont? And the answer is very. And I said, and you've got a Vermont captive? She said, oh no, we've got an Arizona captive. And we're an Arizona corporation. But when we set up our Arizona captive, the captive manager said, go to Vermont for education. It's the best place to go. So we've got to enhance that and keep that going as well. And so one of the things you heard from Gail was the criticality of the team, the 3-legged stool, as it were, the economic development part of it, the regulation part of it, and then the VCIA part of it. That team needs people. And one of the things you'll hear from Brittany, I'm sure, is about initiatives that she has that the VCIA is also supporting to try and ensure that we have a strong body of professionals that can both regulate the industry and support the industry through its through the provider network we have. And so it's a vital industry. It's a growing industry. As I mentioned to you last week, one of the participants in the industry said they're already working on 2025 business, and the only thing holding them back is a lack of people. So there are very, very strong winds blowing this industry forwards. And I mentioned a few of the headwinds that you might face. I'm going to certainly cede a bunch of my time to Brittany, who's got a whole bunch of the story to tell as well. But I'm happy to take any questions that you might have for me.
Questions for Kevin? Sean?
Have you considered speaking with the entities that would provide accommodations, lodging and everything, and potentially lobbying them to accommodate this sector in some increased way?
Yeah, we've actually got as radical as establishing a relationship with UVM and saying, any chance we could use your hall, your residential halls, because our conference takes place in August. And, might that be a possibility? Recognizing there are a whole bunch of people that really don't want to go back to the college experience, perhaps. But they were talking about how they're bringing online some new properties that are more designed for graduate students that might be suitable for that. So yeah, we're exploring all of those options.
Well, and the major airlines have spoken about cutting direct routes to New York, Boston, DC, et cetera. So
yeah,
if you want to lobby them on the state's behalf, I wouldn't object. So
yeah, and certainly we end up with the situation like Gail, for example, drove up yesterday, a 2.5 hour drive that became a 5.5 hour drive.
Unusual.
Luckily we do have a sort of a nexus of people in the New England, New York area for whom driving is an option. But certainly there's a bunch of fly-ins as well. So yeah, we're happy to join in lobbying efforts for expanded airline service.
That's helpful.
Into Burlington.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to mention, I think it would be helpful if one of the committee members could attend your conference just to have a good overview of the industry. So
absolutely,
if it's available to us, we'd love to receive an invitation.
Absolutely, there is an open invitation to any and all committee members to attend the conference, and you guys will be getting a specific invite to the Burlington Roadshow coming up in March as well.
Oh, great.
Happy to have you attend any or all of that as well, to meet with some of the industry partners and some of the folks that are interested in getting involved by establishing captives in Vermont.
Do you have a date or?
March the 27th.
That's the last weekend.
March 27th.
27. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
And we're holding it at what may still be called the Hilton in Burlington. Is where we'll be for that.
Any other questions for Kevin? Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Brittany?
Doing House Chair, excuse me. Thank you.
Morning.
Hello again.
Morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you all again. My name is Brittany Nevins, and I'm the Captive Insurance Economic Development Director with the state of Vermont, and I am in the Department of Economic Development, which is within the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And last week I talked about the importance of passing legislation every year because that sends such a strong message to the industry of the support and stability here and the innovation. So I won't go into that today. I promised you last week that I would talk more about the economic side of things. So I have a decent amount of numbers that I'll kind of throw out, but of course, if you'd like me to send anything, just let me know after. So I believe Sandy, the Deputy Commissioner, will be speaking after me. Is that part of the plan? Okay, great. Because I know Sandy's probably got some more specific details around the types of captives that were formed and some of that data and more info about the department. So I won't get into any of that, but my role is specifically to market the captive insurance industry globally and to recruit businesses to license their captive in Vermont. And I am a team of one in my department, and then within the Department of Financial Regulation, there's the Captive Insurance Division, which is about 30 or so staff members that regulate these companies. It's by far the largest regulatory division in the world. So that's a big part of why we are so, we're seen as the gold standard of captive insurance, is that expertise in our regulatory staff. So yeah, to dive in to some of the overarching statistics, and then I'll get into some of the deeper challenges a little bit more too, just to give you a look back at the last year and some of the things that have happened and what we've done. So as Kevin already said, we're #1 in the world now. I guess that, I don't know, means something from what Kevin just said earlier. Hopefully, we won't get in the habit of saying that too much today. But as Kevin also said, there's over 40 states seeking to replicate the success of Vermont's captive industry. And many other states and many other countries are coming into the fold. We licensed 38 new captive insurance companies in 2023, and we've already licensed 9 new captives this year, which is pretty common. Some companies like to start in the new year and get that licensed right away. We have licensed a total of 1,330 captive insurance companies, although Sandy might say that could have increased within the last week. And that's since the captive enabling legislation in 1981. So 1,330 since then in the last 42 years. And last year was among the top 10 highest years of growth in our 40-year history, which has been pretty common. We've had a series of high growth every year for the past 10 years. And at least 7 of Vermont's new captives in 2023 have international roots, hailing from Canada, Chile, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And we have captive insurance companies with foreign ownership in 25 different countries, including the US. So we've got a really big scope of companies that license in Vermont. And we're continuing to work on those relationships that we formed in Mexico, like Kevin said. So we're working with the US Commercial Service to possibly go back to Mexico this fall and possibly go to Monterrey, which is an area of a big manufacturing area, which is a big type of industry that often forms captives. And those companies tend to have relationships with the US and have high imports into the US. So it makes a lot of sense to be looking at Mexico as they have US risk. So we're going to continue that effort. As we've talked about every year, over half of the Dow Jones 30 and Fortune 100 companies have captives in Vermont. But Vermont is also the leading domicile for risk retention group captives. And we have a variety of different captive types. So even though we have these large companies, we also have small and middle-sized captives that license in Vermont as well. And it's not just a tool for companies, it's also a tool for nonprofits and for government entities as well. So there's just an incredible amount of innovative kind of ways to use a captive within higher education. As you saw last year, we had Tracy Hassett come from EdHealth to speak with you all, but it's also waste management systems, childcare, as Gail was talking about. Virtually every industry is using captive insurance as a solution. So it can really have a big impact on society. And so I'm always thinking about how we can work on raising awareness about this tool in Vermont so that Vermont companies can be thinking about this more as well. So really excited about the roadshow, which is what we call it, but here in Vermont in March, because that's going to be a great opportunity for companies to learn about captive insurance. And we do have a handful of Vermont entities that have formed captives. Just a few awards that we got over the last year. So as I said, in 2023, Captive Review and Captive Intelligence were the 2 publications that named Vermont #1 based on the data that they were seeing with our competitors. And so we have the largest number of active captives in a domicile, which really is a great measurement. It's not just the total from 1981, it's actually the health of our domicile in this present moment. We won Domicile of the Year by Captive International. And we won International Domicile of the Year Award by Captive Review this year in Luxembourg. So we all went to Luxembourg and received that award and went to the conference there. Sandy spoke on a couple of panels in Luxembourg this past year. So that was another great award that we've received multiple times. And Sandy Bigglestone, our Deputy Commissioner, who you'll speak with in a moment, of the Captive Insurance Division, she was ranked number 3 in the Power 50 awards this year. So that means basically that Sandy is the 3rd most influential captive insurance professional in the world. She was voted as that. And so there's not many regulators that make it on the list. It's a lot of service providers. So that really speaks to the influence that Vermont has and how Vermont is perceived globally. So I know you want to get into the meat of the economic kind of status of the impact that this industry is having on Vermont. So since 1981, the program has generated about $635 million to date. It's estimated that the premium taxes collected in 2023 were 31.7 million. And the license and exam fees collected was about $2 million. According to a 2019 economic contribution study, which is our latest study that we have available, more than 400 direct high-paying jobs for Vermonters are created by this industry, and those jobs pay on average $92,000 a year. It's likely that these numbers have even grown since then because the industry has grown tremendously since then. And based on the same study, there is a direct contribution of about $100 million yearly to the state's GDP through the work of the captive insurance service providers, the attendance of the conference that Kevin already talked about, and visits from captive insurance companies for their annual meetings and other meetings to do business here. The reason why Vermont is considered the gold standard is a combination of the regulatory team, the robust infrastructure of service providers here. So that's all of the companies that provide essential services to captives are right here in Vermont. Some of the best in the world are here. And lastly, as I've said before, the stable and consistent support from our lawmakers. Before I go into some of the challenges in a little bit more detail, I'm going to focus on the workforce aspect of it, but I do want to echo what Kevin was saying about the hotel and kind of the conference center challenge that we have in Vermont. So I think here in Vermont, it can be, I don't think we mind having a conference at the Doubletree Hotel in Burlington. It's a fine hotel and conference center. And the hotels are great, but we don't mind staying in a dorm maybe. But when you think about the fact that this is a global industry and we are competing with states like Tennessee, Texas, places that have cities that are a huge draw to go to, and they have an infrastructure, they have exciting, huge conference centers that they can go to. It's just not feasible to expect people to come here and stay in a dorm room if we want to maintain the level of quality and status that we have internationally. So we're definitely thinking about that more. And the airline side of it is certainly a challenge. On the other side of it, we also travel around the country and around the world, and it's quite difficult for us to get around the world as well because of those challenges.
Brittany,
Yeah.
Stephanie and I have to go down to House Ed for
Yes.
Zoomville, but
Okay.
Logan will continue on with the committee, and
Okay.
thank you all for coming.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll certainly stop by to
Yes,
see you
please stop at the table.
at the table, and thank you for
Yeah,
joining
of
us.
course. Let me know if you have questions. or
Certainly
anything.
will. And our bill should be up, I think, Friday.
Oh, great.
Ways and Means will see it today. I'm sure there's not any issues here, so I think it'll be up for action on Friday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, just to kind of conclude with diving into the challenges a little bit more. One of the biggest challenges that Kevin was talking about is the workforce challenge in Vermont. And that, anecdotally, talking to service providers and the regulatory team who also need to hire people regularly, It's not so much a challenge of a lack of qualifications or skills for this industry. It's more so a lack of interest and awareness about this industry. So the lack of interest is really, I believe, a part of due to the fact that not many people know about this career path in Vermont, which is unfortunate given that we are the leaders in this, and it's an excellent opportunity for those high-paying, stable jobs that are also innovative and have a lot of things to offer to people. So they're working with these companies from around the world, working with C-suite executives. They're problem solving. No day looks the same. It's a really exciting and innovative industry. So we felt like it was too challenging to solve this problem alone. So with just myself. So I worked to create an initiative called the Vermont Captive Insurance Emerging Leaders Initiative, which is made up of about 30 captive insurance professionals in Vermont. And together we are working to raise awareness about this industry as a career path. So we were formed in March 2023, and the VCIA is funding the initiative, which is amazing. So it's an affiliation of the VCIA, which allows for the support that the group really needs to thrive. And we've hosted 2 networking events and educational events for students over the last year. And we've hosted many other smaller networking events as well. And we've formed new relationships with colleges and universities. We've spoken on multiple panels and with multiple classes over the last year. Sandy is going to be traveling to Temple University outside of Vermont to speak with them. So it's not just in Vermont, but we're mostly focused on the local workforce. And we also created a new student sponsorship program at the annual conference. So that is continuing to grow to provide students here an opportunity. And if you're interested in learning more about the career aspect, we created a new webpage on our website, vermontcaptive.com, that goes into a lot more detail, and we have some videos. So we've just begun the work, but we're seeing some great results so far. And I'm hopeful that we're going to make some change that will really ensure that this industry is sustainable for years to come. So that is mostly what I had. I would encourage you all to take up the opportunity to go to the roadshow in March, and also to share the roadshow with businesses that you're talking to if you hear about insurance challenges. That might be a great opportunity for them to learn more about this tool. So we'll be sharing on social media and all sorts of things in the next week about it. But it's really an in-depth educational event. We're going to do a luncheon with students beforehand. They'll be able to get to go for free. And we'll have 2 captive owners, I believe, not Gail. I believe one Vermont company will be speaking, and then another company from outside of Vermont telling their stories, and then going into the specific details about what captive insurance is. So I hope that you'll join for that. And I know I said a lot, so any questions?
Kirk White, I have more of a comment. I'm really glad to hear about the Captive Insurance Emerging Leaders Program. When we got this talk 2 years ago, there was a young person who was saying, I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do for a career. And I said, captives, you want to do captives. And I sent them to the VCIA and the various pages, and I followed up with them later, and they said, well, I got in, and the web page said, contact this person. I contact that person. They said, contact this person, who sent me back to the web page.
Oh.
And I got in this loop, and no one would communicate with me. No one would answer my questions. And so I gave up. So I'm glad that you have a program. I'm guessing part of the problem might have been you were the only person.
Well, I think, well, part of what ends up happening is people reach out to me and there's not an easy answer. So what I end up doing is I talk to them and I recommend to them that they reach out to the different captive insurance management companies or the different service providers to learn more. So it's really not, there isn't a job page with all of the jobs posted. So people really do have to take it upon themselves to like do a decent amount of work to really learn about the direction they want to go in, because there's actually multiple different roles in the industry as well. So a lot of times people come and they just say, I'm interested. And so they have to do a little more research into the direction they're going.
They
But
felt
that's
like
good to
they got no guidance though.
Huh,
But
okay.
which is,
Yeah.
this is great that you have
Yeah.
a better pathway.
That is great feedback. One of the things I was remiss in mentioning is it's been on the board for Vermont Captive Insurance. We have a very dynamic board. Another member just joined us here, a new addition. But I think that's great feedback is how do you make things more accessible? Because if it's not there, and I think one of the things with Kevin's leadership that we're focusing on is how do we make this more publicized?
Yeah.
How do we get it out there? You know, logistics aside, I don't think that that's necessarily a challenge because what we're finding is people who are getting more and more into this captive industry that support the state of Vermont could be based in Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know, they could be based in Massachusetts, wherever it may be, but that's an excellent feedback.
Yeah, no, that's great to know. Yeah, it's been developed over the last year, so it's been a work in progress. This wasn't something that was part of my role until this year, so it really isn't something one person can do alone. So that's why at this point we have multiple committees under this initiative that are doing this kind of on the ground work, and I often connect people with them too. So hopefully people have a better experience now. And certainly if you'd like to connect them with me at this point, again, I'm happy to talk with them more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't get to see Heather. I don't know. So she's still on. Yeah. Heather, we can't see you, so if you do have any questions, you can just jump in. Must be good. Next we have
Thank you.
Sandy. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Hello again.
What?
So, do we want to walk through the bill again?
No.
That was
Where's the
scary.
drink?
So for the record, Sandy Bigglestone, I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Captive Insurance Division for the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation. I was officially appointed on September 1st of 2022. I have spent I'm in my 27th year in my regulatory career within the Captive Insurance Division. And I have to say, I am coming to you before you today with so much gratitude for being able to work not only in this industry, but for the state of Vermont. I am the fourth leader in the Captive Insurance Division in 42 years. I have had the extreme pleasure of learning and being mentored by so many people within the state of Vermont, within the industry and outside of the industry as well. So I do have, Brittany was talking a little bit about the influence that Vermont has. I do think that there is a heavy lift at times with all of the, not only the mission of carrying out the mission of our division, which is quality regulation, while bringing in quality business into Vermont. We are the gatekeepers. So there are all sorts of organizations that that have insurance problems that look to a captive solution. It doesn't mean they're right for a captive. So we need to be educated enough and skilled enough to recognize that. But the lift that I'm talking about and the influence is really something that I want to I feel very responsible to, you know, have folks within my division also skilled and stepping up where they find that they want to, you know, be a part of some contribution, not only within our division, but to, you know, bring some of the good model of regulatory standards out beyond Vermont. You heard from Brittany and Kevin about the 41 other jurisdictions within the US. Certainly worldwide, there are about 7,000 plus captive insurance companies worldwide. We certainly don't have them all. We probably don't want them all. You know, did you hear that we were #1 in the world? But, you know, as a regulator, my objective is not only to educate, but be a learner. I'm a lifetime learner. And so as things are changing within the industry, as things are changing within the companies that we regulate, I like to understand our folks. We have 32 folks within the division. Thank you for your support in helping us grow to keep up and have the resources to do the good work that we do. You know, I think that if we were to look at the competition, as a regulator, I'm not so much interested in competing with other domiciles so much as I am interested in being a leader in the industry, to model good, responsible regulation. We have a great set of rules on the books. We have a great infrastructure within Vermont that is growing as well, and I'd like to see it grow more and have the industry and the folks working within the industry, whether it's legal services, captive management, banks, investment managers, actuarial services, CPA firms, all of the folks that have a hand, BCIA, the Industry Association, all of the folks that have a hand in serving the industry. I'd like to see them have the necessary resources and to grow the workforce. We are the center of excellence. So I think that, you know, in order to do that, we all need to sort of focus on that education piece and talking about how we got to where we are today in our respective roles. That said, as a regulator, it's not so much that I want to compete with the other domiciles as I want to lead and be a good model. So dare I say, if we don't stay at #1, but we still have a quality domicile where quality companies come, I'm okay with that. That said, I'm also enjoying being #1 and having folks. It has this aura about it, or this way of, you know, anyone that has a question, whether they're within Vermont or outside of Vermont, seeking a captive or just looking to be educated, they look at Vermont as a resource to go to ask questions. I think we're okay with that. With the Vermont, the Emerging Leaders Initiative, certainly websites and things like that can always be improved. I know at DFR, we're always looking at how can our website be as friendly as possible and people can get at the information that they need. We always tout that we are knowledgeable, but accessible and available. So I think there are always those instances and through great feedback, and being out there to seek feedback. I think having that and being able to have a pool of people with good contact information to make sure that we are always accessible and available. So I wanted to go through a little bit, Brittany had mentioned about our, a lot about our numbers. I did want to mention, I want to supplement that with a few more things. Gross written premium, in 2022 was $42 billion. And that was a significant increase. Of course, the number of captives increased, but the gross premium is also a measure of the health and the robust population of captives that we have. And that was a significant increase over the last 4 years. You heard from Gail, and she, you know, she comes from an organization that happens to be in childcare. So many organizations have insurance problems. There are cycles to the insurance marketplace. There's the soft cycle, there's the hard market cycle. There is always an insurance gap or a problem that organizations can look to captives to solve. So I think that regardless of the type of organization, some of the problems are very common from organization to organization. And so that's what we see. But some of the industry sectors that have grown over the past few years, not only education, but manufacturing. Brittany mentioned manufacturing, nonprofit organizations, governmental entities, even insurance companies form captives. There are some challenges in the commercial marketplace that continue, in particular with cyber insurance. Cyber liability is a huge exposure for any organization. Insurance companies are looking to solve some of those problems by having a captive. Just like other organizations, property has been very challenging. And then you heard from Gail, you know, we have a number of organizations, not only in childcare, but other nonprofit sectors where the commercial marketplace has failed to provide the types of coverage within the policies that these organizations need to operate, in particular with sexual abuse and molestation. It's, you know, as Gail said, it's not easy to roll off the tongue, but these are exposures and issues that do exist in the real world. And so we're happy to provide, you know, expertise and a place for captives to land. Our top two industry sectors that continue to be the top two are manufacturing and healthcare. Healthcare first, then manufacturing. Years ago, that was flipped. We are adding more and losing less. There's always a life cycle to a captive, or there can be a life cycle. They close up for various reasons, primarily mergers and acquisitions at the parent company level, redomiciles to other jurisdictions, and sometimes they're just use up their useful life for an organization, and they no longer need them. So we do have, while we have licensed over the 42 years, 1,330 captives, we have 668 currently that are active, and those are licensed. So I guess I'll just leave it there and just to express my gratitude again for helping us to do good work and to carry out our mission for quality regulations. And I appreciate your support.
Thanks so much for coming in. Questions? Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I guess we were gonna pause there for a moment.
They were
We can go offline.